Yamuna Tira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhare Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachare Yamuna Tira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajak Jai Status Samadhis Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Shri Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Shri Jagannath Baladeva Subhadra Devi Ki Shri Jagannath Rathayatra Mahotsava Ki Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning, devotees, thank you. This morning, we are going to discuss some of the glories of Sri Jagannath, Baladeva and Subhadra Devi. Sri Jagannath, Baladeva, Subhadra Devi ki jai. Their glories, of course, are unlimited, but at least we can touch on some, particularly in terms of how they became manifest, basically, yes. How they became manifest, under what circumstances like that. Actually, already the other day, I think Friday it was, His Holiness Bhakti Marg Swami Maharaj already discussed like a real long-term historical background for the manifestation of the deities. And with King Indradyumna and the one devotee Vidyapati, and that whole story, quite a long story. And in the end, Indradyumna had those deities carved, 3 deities carved, but the carver, Vishvakarma, he said that no one can come in. He was carving in a room. No one can come into the room until I've finished, until I say so. Otherwise, if anyone comes in, that's it. I'll stop right on the spot and walk out, and you won't see me again. And the deities will just be as they are when I finished. So that happened. King Indradyumna, after some time, he's a great devotee, and he really, really wants to have darshan and worship these wonderful deities. So he couldn't restrain himself, and one day he sort of opened the door a bit and looked in and saw. And the deities, they were going to be, at least the idea, the plan was, they were going to be sort of regular, if there is such a thing, regular deities who look like us, kind of, to some degree at least, basically kind of typical human forms, very nice, of course, but yeah, like that. So they were just sort of partially on the way to being in those forms, but they definitely were not like regular deity forms, as we know, for example, here on the altar in Radha and just wait, 10 minutes or so, and we'll see them again. Yeah. So they were partially formed. But Vishvakarma, he saw that, someone is spying on me, and he just walked out. That was it, finish. And of course, Indradyumna, he's the king. He could have called for some other carver to, can you please finish these deities in a certain way? These people are expert and highly experienced. But he saw these forms and he was so struck. They're just so beautiful. They're just amazing. They have such a particular character. We'll leave them as they are and worship them as they are. And that's what they did. And that's what they're doing. And that's what we're doing. And that's what we did on Friday, because Jagannath is particularly worshipped through Rath Yatra. When he's standing in the temple on the altar, that's nice, that's fine, it's wonderful. But on the altar, you must know, Jagannath, Baladeva and Subhadra, they're just thinking, when are we going to get out on Rath Yatra again? We hope it's soon, because that's where they belong. I mean, that's where they're at home. So, but now, what we're going to do, we're going to look at the historical background, but specifically in a different context to Indradyumna, Vidyapati, and so on, in terms of Lord Krishna, because Jagannath is Lord Krishna, and Lord Balaram and Subhadra, particularly in terms of their personal pastimes when they were present on this planet. So to do that, we will begin by reading a few verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, from the 10th canto, chapter 82. Krishna and Balaram meet the inhabitants of Vrindavan. We'll begin with verse 39, because the background in terms of Lord Krishna himself personally, and his personally manifesting the form of Jagannath, it happens. There's a whole pastime, a couple of pastimes even, behind it all. And it's all connected with a particular event which occurred while Lord Krishna was here on this planet, not so long before the Battle of Kurukshetra, but a little while, sometime before the Battle of Kurukshetra. Battle of Kurukshetra, which happened 36 years before Lord Krishna left the planet. Yes, he was on the planet 125 years. 36 years before. What's 125 minus 36? Any mathematicians here? 89, is it? Did I get it? It's 89, yeah. I was not good at mathematics either in school. But 89 years before, when Krishna had been on the planet 89 years, the Battle of Kurukshetra happened. This was a few years, some years before that. Right, and so what happened was there was a great solar eclipse. And the tradition was, the practice was, that for followers of Vedic culture, means like for people all over Southeast Asia, all over, it's not just India, but all over from at least Afghanistan, if not further, all the way over into Indonesia. The Vedic culture was the culture. And the practice was that when there's an eclipse, either solar, lunar, when there's an eclipse, then everyone must go to some sacred place where there is some sacred either river or lake, something like that. And during the eclipse, everyone must immerse themselves in those sacred waters. and chant the holy names of the Lord. This is what happened when Lord Chaitanya appeared. So that's what happened at this time, around 5,000 years ago. So many people gathered at Kurukshetra, because at Kurukshetra there's a big lake. It's called Brahma Sarovar. It's a big lake. It is said to be the navel lake, the navel, which has water in it, the navel lake of Garbhodakshai Vishnu. And it's big. And it's still there in the middle of Kurukshetra's a city now. There's this big lake. So, and it's very sacred, because Kurukshetra, that's mentioned right at the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, that Kurukshetra was a very sacred place of pilgrimage and of performance of sacrifice at that time, 5,000 years ago, when the battle took place. Yes, it was a very sacred place where the demigods would assemble, and members of the Kuru family would gather and perform sacrifices. So therefore, Lord Krishna came from Dwaraka, which is on the west coast, and from Kurukshetra, it's a good 1,000 kilometers. It may be something more. It's quite a long way. But they came. Krishna and his 16,108 wives and so many other associates, they all came from Kurukshetra. Then Nanda Maharaj, Mother Yashoda, and all the residents of Vrindavan, including all the gopis, they all came from Vrindavan. It's not so far, but it's still, not like from Dwaraka, but it's still 400 kilometers by road nowadays, 150 kilometers to Delhi, then north around 250. So they all gathered, and many others. It's described in these. There's a couple of chapters, three chapters or so, dealing with this, the whole pastime of the eclipse. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Yeah, all the different things that happened during that eclipse. It's 3 chapters, and so many people came from all over, actually. So, yes, among those who came, as we said, Lord Krishna came, and the inhabitants of Vrindavan came, and they all met. And they had not seen each other since Krishna left Vrindavan. Krishna left Vrindavan. He was around 10 years and 3 months, and I forget how many days, maybe 24. That's described also elsewhere in the 10th canto. So he hadn't been there for 60 years, maybe 7. Hadn't been there. He hadn't seen the inhabitants of Vrindavan for at least 60, maybe 70 years, maybe something a little more perhaps. But anyway, around 60 or 70 years. And Krishna and all the Brijbasis, they were reunited after all those years and decades of separation. They were reunited in Kurukshetra. And it was really, well, Srila Prabhupada, who is the master of understatement, says that when they met, it was a very emotional situation. Yeah. That's classic Srila Prabhupada. Yeah. So now what happened in terms of Jagannath, Baladeva and Subhadra Devi? Because Krishna came looking like this. So, but what happened though, so that Krishna, Balaram and Subhadra, they manifested these forms as we know them. We saw them on the chariot on Friday, and they're on the altar there in our Phoenix temple. Now that's what we're going to discuss today. Right. So fasten your seatbelts and just, tune in, because it's quite something actually. There are two main parts, or three, to this whole event. So first of all though, we'll read how Lord Krishna, he was already there, he had already arrived. Then the inhabitants of Vrindavan arrived, and he met all of them. And they all met him, and they all greeted and came and embraced and exchanged affection and affectionate words. And then Krishna saw the gopis, who are the topmost of all devotees, absolutely all. And the dearmost, by far the dearmost of all Lord Krishna's devotees. So we'll read a few verses from this 10th canto, chapter 82, Krishna and Balaram meet the inhabitants of Vrindavan. We'll begin with verse 39 and then go on and read a few chapters. I'll read the Sanskrit of this verse 39 and then we'll just read some of the translations. So Sri Shuka Uvacha Gopyascha Krishnam Upalabhya Chiradabhishtam Yat Prekshane Drishishu Pakshma Kritam Shapanti Drigbiradi Kritam Alam Parirabhya Sarvas Tadbhavam Apur Api Nitya Yujam Durapam. Translation. Shukadev Goswami said, while gazing at their beloved Krishna, the young gopis used to, this is before, they used to condemn the creator of their eyelids, which would momentarily block their vision of him when they blinked. Now, seeing Krishna again after such a long separation, with their eyes they took him into their hearts, and there they embraced him to their full satisfaction. In this way they became totally absorbed in ecstatic meditation on him. Although those who constantly practice mystic yoga find such absorption difficult to achieve. So they're seeing him for the first time after so many years, a good number of decades. They're seeing him again. So what an experience. We've all experienced separation to some degree, but that separation we certainly cannot properly comprehend. Maybe a little touch. So I'll carry on. Just read the verses. The Supreme Lord approached the gopis in a secluded place as they stood in their ecstatic trance. After embracing each of them and inquiring about their well-being, he laughed and spoke as follows. So I'll read a few of these verses Lord Krishna now talking to the gopis. Lord Krishna said, "My dear girlfriends, do you still remember me?" Well, you know what the answer to that is. But anyway, he's just, sort of vibing with them. "Do you still remember me? It was for my relative's sake that I stayed away so long, intent on destroying my enemies. Do you perhaps think I'm ungrateful and thus hold me in contempt? After all, it is the Supreme Lord who brings living beings together and then separates them. Just as the wind brings together masses of clouds, blades of grass, wisps of cotton, and particles of dust, only to scatter them all again, so the Creator deals with his created beings in the same way, rendering." So this is a very important verse. Let me just read the purport first. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the gopis then replied, "But that Supreme Lord you are blaming is none other than yourself, O most clever of speakers. Everyone in the world knows this. Why should we be ignorant of this fact?" "All right," Lord Krishna then told them, "if this is true, I must be God. But still I'm conquered by your loving affection." So the verses, rendering devotional service to me qualifies any living being for eternal life. That means even residents of Chatsworth. We call it Chats. Or Soweto, or Phoenix, or Cape Town, Joburg, etc., etc. Yes. So rendering devotional service to me qualifies any living being for eternal life. But by your good fortune, you have developed a special loving attitude toward me, by which you have obtained me. Dear ladies, I am the beginning and end of all created beings, and exist both within and without them, just as the elements ether, water, earth, air, and fire are the beginning and end of all material objects, and exist both within and without them. In this way, all created things reside within the basic elements of creation, while the spirit souls pervade the creation, remaining in their own true identity. You should see both of these, the material creation and the self, as manifest within me, the imperishable supreme truth. Shukadeva Goswami said, having thus been instructed by Krishna in spiritual matters, the gopis were freed of all tinges of false ego because of their incessant meditation upon him. And with their deepening absorption in him, they came to understand him fully. And then they reply, but let's get into now the appearance of Lord Krishna, Lord Balaram, Lady Subhadra, as we know them, as we have experience of them. So as this was all happening, as we mentioned, there were many people there. And there were all, basically the entire Brijbasi population was there. And at least so many, maybe also practically all, the Dwarkavasi population was there too. And now all the Brijbasis are meeting Krishna, actually seeing Krishna for the first time for so long, seeing him physically, so to speak. Of course, they're always seeing him within themselves. None of them, and what to speak of the gopis, but none of them ever forgot Krishna for a moment, for 1 second, for all those years. Even there are descriptions, if you go there, Krishna left from Nandagram in Vrajmandala. He left from Nandagram, from the top of the hill down, and then there's a road, the old road to Mathura is still there, at least for a couple of kilometers or so, going straight out from Nandagram. So, because Krishna had promised, I will be back. And Krishna, he never breaks his promise to his devotees. If he makes a promise to anyone else, we've got to watch out. Because if it interferes with his relationship with his devotees, he'll break it. No problem. He'll just break it. Tough luck. Really? No, really. Therefore, on the battlefield, he took up a weapon against Bhishma. It was a wheel, actually, but pretty heavy weapon. And he rushed at Bhishma when Bhishma was putting Arjuna into danger. And there's a famous painting you may have seen, Arjuna rugby tackling Krishna. You've seen that picture? Right around the legs. Is it there? Oh, there it is. Sort of. Anyway, if you're familiar with rugby, I'm brought up in New Zealand. We're familiar with rugby. So he gave him a full-on tackle around the legs as there's Krishna coming at Bhishma with the wheel, because Arjuna didn't want Krishna to get a bad name as a person who breaks his promises. Yeah. But it was too late, because he'd already taken up the weapon, even though he promised that he wouldn't do so in the battle. Right, so anyway, though, everyone was there and everyone saw, particularly the queens, Krishna's queens from Dwaraka, they saw the emotions, the extreme intensity of the emotions of the Brijbasis when they met Krishna, and particularly the gopis. And of course the queens of Dwaraka, their relationships with Krishna are conjugal. They are conjugal. And each one of them had 10 children. So they're real conjugal relationships and real conjugal emotions they have for Krishna. And they're with him just basically all day, every day. So the relationships are very close and very intense. But when they saw the intensity of the affection of the Brijbasis, but then the gopis, they couldn't believe it. We've never seen anything like this at all. We thought we loved Krishna so much that we were controlling Krishna. we'd ask him, do this, and he'd do it. Do that, and he'd do it. And he would never protest. So we thought that he loves us to the ultimate degree. But now we have seen this. This is just another dimension altogether. So in that mood of extreme interest, just overwhelmed, we want to understand what are these Vrindavan relationships like with Krishna, and most particularly the gopis. They thought, well, how are we going to do that? We need some help. We need someone who was there, who lived there, and who saw it regularly. The relationships between Krishna and the gopis. We need someone like that to explain it to us. Otherwise, it's just, it's extra dimensional and it's beyond us. It's just beyond us. So then they thought, well, who could tell us? We've just met the bridge buses. We never met them before. We just met them. And they don't know us. So, how will they relate it to us so we understand and, we're able to comprehend? We need the help of someone who was there in Vrindavan and witnessed it, but who is also one of us from Dwaraka, and who knows us and will be able to help us understand in ways which are relevant to us. But who is that? And then one of the queens thought, I know who that is. It's Rohini, Mother Rohini, the mother of Balaram. She was there all those years that Krishna and Balaram were there. She witnessed all of these things. But then when Krishna and Balaram left Vrindavan, came to Mathura, and then later to Dwaraka, she came also. Yes, because she's a resident of both places. So they approached her, Rohini, and asked, can you please help us to understand what is this love of the Brijbasis, but particularly the gopis, for our husband, Krishna? So Rohini was happy to do that. But she told him, we don't want to create a disturbance here. There's some big gathering, and, you all get really worked up about things. We have to go to a secret place around the corner, down the back, over the hill, something like that. And I'll explain it all to you. So you have to, these are the queens, you have to, 16,108 of them. But there was a lot of people there. I mean, there were millions. There were millions. All the royal families, I mean, at least many of them, they were all there. So they all sort of, made their way away to the appointed place around the corner, down the road, some not very far, but a little way away. And they sat down, the queen sat down, and Rohini sat down on an elevated platform and started explaining the Vrindavan pastimes, which the queens were just not familiar with. A little bit here and there, but they're not really familiar with in detail at all. but Rohini was. So this is going on. And she started off with the childhood pastimes, cowherd pastimes. Then she reached the rasa dance. At around that point, or just before that point, just a little before, Lord Krishna, he's meeting everyone he hasn't seen for years, and it's all just, amazing, intense exchanges. And suddenly he realized, hey, where have my wives gone? What happened? Where are they gone? And so he thought, something's going on. I got to find them. So off he went, looking around here and there. Finally he saw over that way, some distance, he saw, oh, that's Rukmini. Oh, and Satyabhama. And Jambavati. Hey, they're all there with Rohini. But, it's obviously some confidential discussion is going on. So Krishna didn't just walk up and say, hey, what are you doing? He snuck up from behind, and he got behind a rock, which was just behind Rohini, and he tuned in and he listened to the description of a couple of pastimes. Now, Rohini, her main reason was? That she didn't want to do it. She wanted to do it very secretly, so no one would know, particularly Krishna wouldn't know, because she was afraid that if Krishna heard his Vrindavan pastimes, because he's living in Dwarka now, with Rohini and Vasudeva and Devaki and so on and so forth, then she was afraid he'll leave and go back to Vrindavan. Yeah. So therefore she did it secretly, Rohini. So anyway, Krishna understood, there's some special thing going on here. So he snuck up behind and he heard some of the pastimes just before the rasa dance. And Krishna became astonished. Wow, yeah. That's amazing. Not that he exactly forgot. He didn't forget, but he was caught up in his Dwarka activities. He really was. He was absorbed there. So, but now his remembrance is being stimulated very strongly. And then the description of the rasa dance happened. And Krishna just became overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. That rasa dance, the supreme of all pastimes, and by far his most favorite pastime, Krishna became overwhelmed, and his body transformed on the spot into the form of Jagannath. Legs retracted, arms partially, and of course it's ecstatic. So big smile, big round eyes, like, wow, this is incredible. Yeah. In the meantime, back home at the ranch, back in Kurukshetra, Lord Balaram was thinking, where's Krishna? Where's Krishna gone? Because they're basically inseparable. And, he just, if Krishna goes this way, Balaram goes this way. If Krishna goes that way, Balaram goes that way too. He's almost like Krishna's shadow. But he understood. Krishna has gone. Not only Krishna's gone, all his wives have gone. And it looks like all the gopis have gone. And my mother, Rohini, has also gone. Something's going on here. What's happening? So off he went now to find Krishna and the others, particularly Krishna. Then he saw, they're all the queens and Rohini. And there's, what is that? Is that Krishna? Could it be? It looks like Krishna, but what is this? What's happened to Krishna? So he came over, and now he tuned in, and he heard some of his own pastimes. Rohini was telling. And then he heard the pastime when he returned to Vrindavan. And then Balaram became overwhelmed, and his body transformed into the form as we know it. And then Subhadra came looking for her brothers, and same thing happened to her. And they stayed like that until the discussion finished. Then the discussion finished, they came back to their regular, so to speak, forms. And then the whole thing happened, the eclipse happened, and all the ceremonies and different things that people do traditionally to ward off the evil influences of eclipses, they were all done, and then everything was finished. Eclipses finished, all the final pujas and whatever else they do, it's all finished. Everyone's finished. Time to say goodbye and go home. So, Nanda Maharaj, this is described actually in Padma Purana. Nanda Maharaj, that morning, said to the to the bridge buses, just all the bridge buses, all right, everything's finished. Let's go home. And everyone said, yes, right. Let's go home. We'll pack our bags. Let's go home. But the gopis, Radharani and the gopis said, just a minute. Could we please go and say goodbye to Krishna? And then we'll go after lunch. We'll go after lunch. Yes, no problem. And Nanda Maharaj said, sure. Go say goodbye to Krishna. So they did. Haribol. So they said goodbye to Krishna, came back, had lunch, and Nanda Maharaj said, all right, let's pack up and we'll leave. We'll go back to Vrindavan. And everyone said, yes, right, fine, let's do it. But Radharani and the gopis said, just one thing. Can we just say goodbye to Krishna just one more time? We haven't seen him so long. And we'll go tomorrow morning. It's fine. And Nanda Maharaj said, all right then. Yeah, okay, you can do that. So they did. They said goodbye to Krishna again. They came back, stayed overnight. Next morning, Nanda Maharaj said, right, we must go. We need to go. Slightly more intense. We need to go. And everyone, all the bridge buses said, yes, let's go. Fine. And the gopis said, yes, right, we should go. But just one thing. Could we just say goodbye to Krishna just one more time, just one? And we'll definitely go after lunch. And Nanda Maharaj said, well, all right then. So they went and said goodbye to Krishna again, came back and had lunch, and Nanda Maharaj, you know what he said? That's what he said. Time to go. Let us go. We need to go, actually. And they all said, yes, you're right. We definitely need to go, of course. So let's go. But Radharani and the gopis said, just one thing. Could we just say goodbye to Krishna just one more time? That's all. Just one more time, only. And Nanda Maharaj said, well, all right then. So they said, and they said, we will definitely go after lunch. You can depend on us. So they went and said goodbye to Krishna one more time and came back and had lunch again. And Nanda Maharaj said, right, we are going. We are going now. As we say in South African English, it's a special dialect. Now, now, now means now, as opposed to now, which means, yeah, in a while. Or now, which means quite soon, actually, fairly soon. So, right, where are we? We're in the afternoon, I think. So they went and said goodbye to Krishna and came back and stayed overnight. And Nanda Maharaj, in the morning, said, we are going now. Maybe he had been to South Africa. And everyone said, yes. We are not here. We have gone, practically. And the gopis said, just one thing. Could we just say goodbye to Krishna just one more time? Just one. Just one. So Padma Purana explains, this went on for 3 months. 3 months. Finally, Nanda Maharaj was on the verge of nervous breakdown, or maybe beyond the verge. And the gopis understood, we actually have to go. we got to go. That's it, finished. So they went to say goodbye to Krishna for the last time. And they told Krishna, we don't know when we're going to see you again. So, Krishna, you have to come with us. We are taking you with us. And Krishna was a bit, sort of, what would you say? Anyway, hesitant. So they put him on his chariot and put Balaram and Subhadra on their chariots, tied ropes to them. Don't worry about horses. Tied ropes to them and just pulled them before they could do anything. They were moving down the road to Vrindavan, 400 kilometers, more or less. And of course, the Brijbasis were in so much ecstasy. We're going back to Vrindavan, and Krishna is coming with us back to Vrindavan. They were in so much ecstasy. They didn't stop. They just pulled the chariots 400 kilometers. And the whole way, they were dancing and chanting. I mean, devotees were dancing and chanting the other day, Friday. It wasn't bad. It was quite good. Not bad at all. But it wasn't like that. It was not like that. And so Krishna and Balaram and Subhadra, they're on their chariots, And they're watching all of this right in front of them. The ecstasy of the Brij Basis, particularly the gopis. And they just became totally overwhelmed. And again, for a second time, they manifested their forms as Jagannath, Baladeva, Subhadra. Yeah. Although after a while they withdrew those forms and had the sort of regular forms. And they returned to Vrindavan. They returned to Vrindavan. Yes. So Krishna did return to Vrindavan. Sometimes devotees wonder, did Krishna, or it seems he didn't, but actually he returned to Vrindavan and stayed there for a while and then went back to Goloka Vrindavan. 3 months he stayed. And then all the Brij Basis went back to Goloka with him. But Dwarka Krishna stayed on. So Jagannath Baladeva Subhadra means Dwarka Krishna in the ecstasy of returning to Vrindavan. Yeah. And becoming Vrindavan Krishna, because really there's only one Krishna. Hare Krishna. Shri Jagannath Baladeva Subhadra Devi Ke. Shri Jagannath Rathiyacha Mahotsava Ke. Srila Prabhupada Ke. Haribol.